Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, with primary election day in 3 weeks, the Democratic race for county executive gets heated. While Democrats wait for a gubernatorial candidate to catch on fire, Republicans just keep pumping money into Larry Hogan's campaign. 50 major floods since its founding. Is historic Ellicott City beyond rescue? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the Dean of Democratic Punditry, Sam Statland. Maryland Republican National Committee woman, Nicolee Ambrose. Attorney and Republican activist, Diane Nash Dillon. And education activist, Cynthia Rubenstein. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. There are 9 candidates running for the Democratic nomination for governor. According to Josh Kurtz, the Maryland Matters, during the second televised debate, all 9 candidates largely agreed with one another on every issue, producing a snoozer of an event. Meanwhile, the incumbent, Larry Hogan, reported that he has over $9 million to spend on the race between now and November, which is more than all of his Democratic candidates combined. Sam, it's been a long-held belief that almost any Democrat who had a pulse could win statewide in Maryland, but there are signs that your party may be in trouble. Is it this time?
Well, I think that our last 2 gubernatorial candidates absolutely came under the designation of not very good candidates. But I think we have at least 3 really great candidates in this coming race who will make a difference. I think Rich Madaleno is good. Rashid Baker is absolutely terrific. And the Reverend from over in Baltimore, the gentleman
Ben Jealous?
Yeah, I think Ben's can make a difference.
But who's going to actually capture the imagination of the voters? These guys all sound alike. They talk alike. Who's going to break through?
From a state government point of view, a guy that's been in the state, knows how the accounting goes, knows where the money is, and has passed significant major legislation. Rich Madaleno is
where
to me
where are the votes
big leader.
Coming from, Sam?
Well, where they always come from. Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Anne Arundel, Prince George's, and Montgomery. You hold those counties together, and you stand a very good chance of winning the race to be the governor of the state of Maryland.
All right, but Nicolee, Governor Hogan has proven popular and skillful in being identified as an independent. Will that be enough to get him reelected?
Yes, because we all know as Republicans in Maryland, you can't just have Republicans vote for you and win. You have to capture the imagination of independents and Democrats, and Larry Hogan does that in triplicate. Sam was talking about how popular, how you need Baltimore County. Baltimore City helps, Prince George's and Montgomery County. Governor Hogan is extremely popular in Baltimore County. Before the riots in 2014, he had almost 22% of the vote in Baltimore City, and his approval rating in Baltimore City alone is over 55%. So when you have someone who's just done such a good job governing, been fiscally responsible, and governed with common sense, you've got a recipe for success. So I'm looking forward to Governor Hogan being reelected.
I think he'll be very difficult to beat.
Really?
Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah.
The Democrats have had a hard time finding stuff that would stick to him that would be negative to voters, even Democrat voters. So it's a hard slog from June to November for the Democratic gubernatorial candidate.
So but Diane, Frank DiFilippo, writing in Maryland Matters, says the Democratic candidates are lacking a candidate who can electrify the voters. This is what we've been talking about the last couple minutes. Who's going to break through and get the fundraising and get the imagination of the electorate?
I don't see anybody. As a matter of fact, I don't see any of the 9 candidates catching fire. I think there's a distinct lack of enthusiasm, and this is not to say that because of the numbers advantage that Democrats have in Maryland, that it's going to be, Larry Hogan's got it. But I don't see any of the 9 who were members of the Snooze Fest debate the other day are going to catch on fire and get anyone's imagination, attract the money that they need, which is not coming in, And even if the money were to come in, you can have all the money in the world and it's not going to create an issue that will be able to garner the attention of the voters and get what they're going to need in order to beat Larry Hogan. The message the Democrats would need right now is we're better than Larry Hogan. We need to change what Larry Hogan is doing. And right now the state, per public opinion polls, is doing better than it's done in a decade. The Chesapeake Bay is better than it's been in a decade. We've had 4 years of tax cuts. We brought back 100,000 jobs.
That sounds really, really good. But let's face it. Let's go to the reality. Let's go to the reality of the situation. And Cynthia, the reality of the situation is that the state is overwhelmingly blue. That there's the registration of Democrats on a ratio to Republicans is overwhelming, and don't they want their government back? And isn't Rushern-Baker the guy that's going to lead them back to victory?
I think that Rushern-Baker is the leading Democratic candidate for the primary, but as I said earlier, any of those Democrats is having a hard time making themselves heard about what Larry Hogan has done that is bad for the state.
Do they really have to be heard? Sam, you said that the last candidate running against Larry Hogan when he won his first term was a weak candidate. Isn't the fact that a Democrat just has to be able to stand up and not make mistakes in order to get the Democratic vote?
No, I think you still have to lead. I think you have to know what you're talking about. You still have to be aware of what your base is and what they're going to vote for and what motivates them. And I think that between Rich Madaleno and Rushern-Baker, these guys are covering the state of Maryland. They are out every night. They are really working hard to get out their image and get out their message to drive home the importance of having a Democrat within the state. Now, one more point is you're talking about the gubernatorial race. Let's bring it home right here to Montgomery County, where in Montgomery County, there's not one viable Republican that can motivate any Democrat to vote for them, period.
Wait a minute, we'll talk about the county race.
Years.
We'll take county race in a second. But I want to ask you, Nicolee, since you know Baltimore so well, what did the death of Kevin Kamenetz, how did that affect the Democratic primary?
Well, once again, to me, the entire Democrat primary is characterized by lackluster candidates racing to the left. And what every Marylander is terrified of is 80 more taxes like we had under O'Malley for the next Democrat they elect governor, and no more jobs and kids living in their basement because they can't get a job after they graduate with $100,000 of student loans. So when you add, we don't want more taxes, we want our kids to have jobs, we'd all like to have jobs and raises occasionally, and hey, Larry Hogan is just likable with common sense, let's vote for Larry Hogan.
All right, well now we're going to go to Sam's Sam always likes to jump the gun on topics. So following the important endorsement by the Washington Post for businessman David Blair, the gloves are coming off in Montgomery County in the executive race there, writes Andrew Metcalf for Bethesda Beat. Roger Berliner, a Democratic candidate for county council and former county council member, unveiled Wednesday what appears to be the first negative TV campaign for the Democratic primary directed at a single opponent. Berliner takes a shot at businessman David Blair, and the narrator compares Blair to Donald Trump. Cynthia, prior to the endorsement by the Washington Post, who even heard of David Blair, Mark Elrich was considered to be the leading candidate. Is Blair the man to beat now?
I still think the race is pretty open because the last time polling was done, over half of likely Democrats for the primary were undecided. But I think that Mark Elrich has a lot of name recognition and he's racked up a lot of endorsements. David Blair has the Washington Post and a lot of money, but there are some other strong candidates who have a lot of grassroots support and have held elected office in Montgomery County and also have a base, like George Leventhal and Rose Krasnow. So I still think the race is open. We have 3 weeks to go, and I would not say that Mark Elrich is a prohibitive favorite because of what I just said.
Well, why do you think the Post endorsed David Blair?
I think that they endorsed David Blair because but they were taken in by his business history and acumen.
But doesn't that say something about the
Yeah, it
three
says
guys?
that the Washington Post is
guys,
anti-union.
the three guys on the county council that were running aren't up to the job.
It was not entirely a surprise to me that they endorsed him, because I think they have a tendency to want to go to the business candidate.
And when you read the Post endorsement, it wasn't a clear endorsement. That endorsement, in my opinion, favored Mark Elrich as well, had trashed the other Democrats in this race.
You're right. It trashed the Democrats in the race. It said they're all stinkers. That they didn't have. There wasn't really a candidate that stood out among the candidates.
The Post supports non-union candidates, and they've been doing so now for about 12 years when their board changed.
And one more
I
thing
think
about
that-
Post endorsements. In prior years, they seem very important. I think they have become less and less important as fewer and fewer people actually read
Nicolee.
newspapers and
Nicolee.
read that page of the paper.
Exactly.
And then that gets to the point of, why do those citizens here in Montgomery County put up with a monopoly and no competition in your political
Because you
system?
guys can't turn out
We
a
have
decent
some
candidate.
fantastic candidates.
Where?
First of all, Robin Ficker is doing a good job running. We have
You guys
LD
wanted to get rid of
14
him.
and 15. We've got great candidates here putting up their name to run to try to give people a two-party system in this county. And why not? What do you have to lose?
You know, I stood
Vote
at
for
the
competition.
At the fair booth, the Republican
Especially
fair
with
booth,
your schools.
at the Ag Fair, where the Republicans wouldn't let Robin stand on the property. They couldn't stand him.
When was
and
that?
A lot of
When was that?
And still, to this day, a lot of the stalwarts of the party aren't backing Robin.
Look, Sam, let's.
And Robin,
Standing
really, of
here
all
as
the
your national
Republicans
committee
lately,
woman for the state,
is the
I'm
only
saying
one
we
that's
are
made a
thrilled that
difference.
we have so many awesome people running here in Montgomery County.
For what office?
We have fantastic people running for state senate, for delegate, for your county council. We have people trying to represent this county and give you a two-party system, and especially if for no other reason than your schools, and that you have children in trailers, you have MS-13 gang problems, you have just unbridled liberal activism in schools, which are keeping your children from being educated. And I'm sorry, you need to put Montgomery County
Montgomery
students,
County public
citizens
schools are the best in the
above.
state, and
They're
highly
dropping quickly.
rated,
They're
highly
dropping
rated
quickly because you
education.
need to
We're-
take
we're-
care of
we're
your
losing the
crime
fo-
and gang
we can
problem.
say
We're
this.
losing
That
the
is
fo- we're
not
losing
the
a
major
particular
problem
race,
in
you can
Montgomery
say
County.
That because
is
of a
not.
lack of interest, because none of the Republican base believes that anybody that you're talking about can win a seat, there's no money coming into the race. It's the exact opposite of what's going on statewide. Hogan appealed, moderate, done a great job amongst a lot of voters. Republicans in Montgomery County, zero.
So actually,
no money. Not
I
in the
can
race,
I
not
can
on the
give you an
issues.
example. This whole state used to be over 8-1 Democrat to Republican. It is now less than 2.3-1. And guess what? Whole areas have turned. I would argue the state is not blue so much anymore. It's a few counties. And the problem where you're getting the least results from your government are places like Montgomery County, where you have one party in charge. Give people a chance, and then you might actually get better
the last
results.
statistics
You can
I
do
saw-
things like ask for audits. You can say, where's our money going? You can push
I'm
back on a school
I'm going to agree
superintendent.
with part of what Nicolee said, and that is that it is a danger for Democrats in Montgomery County to become complacent and to sit on their old Democratic Maryland state laurels, because it is correct that Maryland, certain sections of Maryland are becoming less and less dependably Democrat, and even Montgomery County Democrats cannot be complacent, and absolutely should not be complacent.
I'm going to agree
with what's
with the
going
both
on
of
with the
you.
rest of the state.
I'm going to agree with the both of you, because we wouldn't have term limits if the voters had been pleased with the electeds within Montgomery County.
Sam, you've stumbled on the truth
Yeah.
for the final time as we're going to break. And when we come back from this short break, 50 floods since its founding. Is Ellicott City deserving to be rebuilt? Stay tuned. And welcome back. Founded as a mill town in 1772, Ellicott City was an ideal spot to harness the fast-flowing waters of the four streams that converge there to form the Tiber River, which empties into the larger Patapsco River. Yet some communities are vulnerable to flooding, and venerable Ellicott City illustrates the fact. Cynthia, according to Jim Caldwell, Director of Community Sustainability for Howard County, this town has flooded since the day it was created. In fact, there have been over 50 major floods there that have struck. Should the state help Ellicott City rebuild?
Well, I think our governor has already announced that the state is going to help Ellicott City rebuild, and the
Pandering
county.
for political dollars, isn't he?
Well, it is an election year, isn't it? And the county
But should they?
executive.
But should they?
Well, look at the reasons to rebuild. Number one, it is a historic and historical city. It is a tourist draw. It is an attractive place for people to come and visit and spend money. And so there is a consideration of those things, and people are planted there, and there are lots of businesses there and homes. So there is a weighing of the decisions about how much to invest, when, over how much time,
and who
et
should
cetera.
foot the bill for that?
Well, some homeowners and business owners are footing the bills. Insurance companies and the state. It's got to be a mix.
All right, Diane, in the aftermath of the 2016 flood, just 2 years ago, multiple studies were conducted into flood control measures for the city. The estimated price tag for 18 major products was $85 million. But even if all 18 projects were completed, it won't eliminate all chances of flooding. Isn't it time to abandon Ellicott City altogether and turn it into a water park so we have another tourist attraction?
I have to say that sounds like the most appealing outcome. But it's hard for me to say that because I am not somebody who's holding a mortgage on one of the buildings that has just been cut in half by the rushing waters. I do think it's time to take a really hard look at the merits of putting more money into Ellicott City. I know it's a beautiful area. I know that it's got historical value, but I think some really hard, tough engineering decisions have to be made. And I think because of the geography of it, the fact that it is on a floodplain, there are already areas that need to be rebuilt, if it is to be rebuilt, that are not covered by flood insurance. I mean, at some point you just have to understand that it's a losing proposition. And again, as somebody who's not holding a mortgage, it's really easy for me to say. But I think this might be an unseen message 2 years in a row. I mean, one time is one issue, but the fact that this has happened again with more of a vengeance than the first time around, the
Sam,
flooding.
I just heard the county executive talking about this problem, and he said, look, we can spend all this money, but we can't guarantee that the city won't flood if we get 8 inches of rain over a 5-hour period.
And the most interesting thing going on with this particular last 2 floods, which you don't hear anybody talking about because it's relatively new, FEMA, the Federal Flood Program, because so much rebuilding was being done in areas where there's floodplains, whether it's coastal or whether it's along the Mississippi River or the Missouri or the Ohio, has a program in place where if you have 2 floods within a 10-year period with a dollar threshold, that these people no longer go into the regular federal flood program. They go into a special program that gets their properties as close as you possibly can get to being safe in a flood. And once they exceed that and put another claim in, they're out of the federal flood program. So you could be in a situation where a lot of people in that downtown Ellicott City area will no longer qualify for federal flood insurance after $85 million has been spent and after the monies that the governor has promised to put into it. And you'll be in a situation where you're going to have a water park because unless the people self-insure for federal flood, they're not going to get a mortgage. They're not going to buy inventory.
I mean,
One interesting statistic from 2016 is that 96 or over 90% of the businesses rebuilt and came back, but only 75% of the residents came back
Right.
after that flood.
Look, I don't want to be harsh about it, and not to be light and treat a subject like this lightly, but it's very difficult. I'm as long as I've lived in this area, and I've lived here all my life, I've heard about Ellicott City flooding almost every time it seems to rain. This, if it hadn't been built, people wouldn't be allowed to build there. And there comes a time when you have to pull the plug and say it's economic obsolescence and you shouldn't be building there
And
anymore.
I think all those questions are coming from all different quarters, from the local government, from residents, from business owners, from the state. It's all
slowly
in
but
the
surely,
mix.
that plug is being pulled
Yes.
because you're not going to have the money next time around to rebuild. No federal funds. And if you don't have federal funds, you're not getting a mortgage.
You're not going to get enough state, and you won't get state money either.
No, you won't get state money either.
So if I may, right, it seems like general assumptions are, oh, we're rebuilding Ellicott City, right? Most assumptions are not, let's make it a water park. So if you're taking a city that has historic value that's built in a gorge, basically, and you've had all this development around it, essentially the only way you can salvage this in any way is by re-engineering the land. So I might suggest we go to the pros, like the Army Corps of Engineers, say, do you have a plan to make this work or not? And then you have to look at other plans like, okay,
Well,
we'll give you money to be
you already-
rebuilt, but don't use the first floor of the
Well,
property.
we're
After
gonna-
the last flood,
Sam, we got to wrap
Corps
it
of
up.
Engineers estimated 85 million, and that still doesn't solve the problem.
We got to wrap it up. Unfortunately, and I feel bad for the people in Ellicott City. Stay tuned for parting shots. And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Sam Statland.
Well, folks, I really don't have a parting shot per se. I want to give it to the Nats because they're doing so well, only a half a game out of first place. But more importantly, this week, our Capitals are doing dynamite. They're in a tie with series. Hopefully they will succeed and we will have a Stanley Cup championship here in Washington. Go Caps.
Thank you, Sam. Nicolee Ambrose, your parting shot.
So I am cautiously giddy with excitement about this Korean summit. It would be such a tremendous accomplishment if we could close out the Korean War from 1953. Should have been done by many other presidents. It would be fantastic if President Trump could seal the deal on this and get it done and really stabilize that region. And I hope if this happens, people give credit where credit is due. For example, when those 3 hostages were freed last week, that should have been on the cover of every newspaper in the nation. And I think it's really important that once again, we give credit where credit is due. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolee. Diane, your parting shot.
I would like to give a great big thank you to all the first responders out there. I have a daughter who's an EMT, and this is based on follow-up from our Ellicott City discussion, particularly for the National Guard, people who run out and risk their lives because of nothing less than love of their country and their countrymen, and in particular Edison Hammond, the 39-year-old National Guard who lost his life trying to save somebody in the flood. So for all of you people out there willing to risk your lives to save the rest of your fellow Americans, thank you indeed. We owe you a great debt.
Thank you, Diane. And Cynthia Rubenstein, your parting shot.
Quickly, 3 weeks to the election, and people are wondering, where am I going to find information about these plethora of candidates? I want to recommend a few blogs. One of them is called Seventh State, which is a must-read in Montgomery County. The other one is called Maryland Matters with Josh Kurtz, a Montgomery County resident and journalist and blogger who does a wonderful job with Maryland Matters. And Source of the Spring is another one in Silver Spring. And Bethesda Beat, which also does a credible job covering political matters. So try those 4 blogs and also talk to your neighbors and friends.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. And to remind you that early voting starts in 2 weeks, and so that you should find out where your early voting polls are around the county. And be sure to vote. I think it's important. One of the things, the criticisms that was made of Mr. Blair was he hadn't been voting. He hadn't been active. And I think it's important for all of us as citizens to be active, to make sure our vote counts. So make sure you vote. Even if it's a primary, your vote counts. So make sure you contribute to the betterment of your county. Thank you, panel, for being here today. Interesting topics, interesting conversation, different slant on things than I expected. Stay tuned each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting Political Talk Show for 21 this week. I'm Casey Aiken.
Oh my God.